It is such an exciting day. We're finally sowing our peppers, our eggplants, our tomatoes for the season. And I'm delighted to share with you how we do it and variations on the theme, because there's as many ways to sow seeds as there are gardeners, as many ways to garden as there are gardeners, right? And certainly there are common mistakes that people make all the time. So I'll share with you the common mistakes people make, and then I'll share with you our 8 steps to sowing beautiful solonids, peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants. So without further ado, here are the key common mistakes that people make. Number 1, starting their seeds too early. It's totally understandable. Also sowing their seeds too deeply, also totally understandable. And not having enough heat or light is the third one. And this is just a case of honesty. It's really hard to be honest with yourself. And we'll talk about that too. Straight talk on heat and light and tomatoes. And then also knowing when to pot up and how is such a thing. So without further ado, here are the 8 steps. I'll just run through the 8, and then we'll spend the next while going through each one so that you can feel really confident sowing your tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants this season, friends. So those 8 steps to planting your tomatoes, peppers, or eggplants, you want to gather all your materials. I'll give you the laundry list in a minute. You want to then fill your containers or get your soil blockers, whatever you're using to actually grow the medium in. You want to sow your seeds, not too many. You want to cover your seeds, not too deep. You want to then label your seeds, always the hardest part for me. And then we'll get to heat and light, straight talk on heat and light for your seedlings. And then we'll talk about when and how to pot up your tomatoes. And finally, taking notes is so essential. So right from the top, let's talk about this key problem that many people have of starting too early. Then we'll dive right into gathering materials. So knowing when to start is such a thing, because social media exists, and as soon as our friends in Georgia start sowing their seeds and putting it on social media, then all of a sudden our friends in New York are like, oh my god, I'm late. And so it's really easy to sow seeds too early in general, and especially in the age of social media. So check it out. I have a whole transplant chart that we made, and it's part of our Rise and Shine, Starting Seeds with Ease. This is a 40-page book that I made, and it's a book hardcover, all the bells and whistles on our website, but you can also get a more pared down and printer-friendly version for free on our website, fruitionseeds.com as well. So this transplant chart is awfully handy, and there's tons of awesome information about tons of different varieties. You'll see in the tomatoes, you want to start them 6 to 8 weeks before your final frost. So regardless of what zone you're in, you want to be starting your tomatoes 6 to 8 weeks before your final frost. Before then, you can technically get away with it if you have an amazing light and are committed to potting them up, and you'll have a huge transplant. But here's a general rule. Younger, unstressed transplants are more abundant in your garden than older, more stressed transplants. So I'll say that again. Younger, unstressed transplants are more abundant, hands down, without question, than older, stressed transplants. So it's better to have a younger, unstressed transplant any day over an older transplant. And I know it's counterintuitive, because especially here in Zone 5 at Fruition Seeds, our short seasons, we're like, we have a short season, I've got to start my seeds early. But it's counterintuitive, because your older stressed transplants, even though you started them earlier, are actually going to be less productive, more stressed, more susceptible to disease, insects, all manner of things, which is so sad. So yes, hold your horses, friends, and as much as you can, hold back on your planting dates. I mean, we're a seed company. We grow thousands, tens of thousands of transplants. It's the first week in April. We are just starting our tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants now. And kind of final call is mid-April. If you haven't sown them by mid-April, that's really getting to be too late. But right now, the first, second week in April is really perfect, especially if you don't have ideal light. You want to err on the side of earlier transplants rather than older transplants. So yes, straight talk on light. And again, this transplant chart and so many more you can find for free on our blog, also on our website with this ebook. And if you want all the pretty bells and whistles and colors and fullness of everything, we have this book on our website as well. So yes, don't start seeds too early. It is one of the hardest things in the world. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, we can gather our materials because we are ready to start planting our seeds. So these materials that you're looking for, you want seeds, you want soil, the very richest potting soil you can find. You want water, warm water, because it's more pleasant to play in than cold. You want a container of some kind, whether it's a container, more standard container, or you want soil blocks. In any event, you want something that drains, but also can nest in something that doesn't drain, so you don't make a mess of your beautiful kitchen or anywhere else that you're starting seeds. You also, these are the optional things, right? Those are the keys that you need, but optional, but optimal, optimizing your seed starting. You want a heat mat is amazing, and also if you have a grow light, your seeds know the difference. Your seedlings know all the difference. And you also can take notes optionally and label, but again, these are like not so optional things. And so we'll get to all of these things in time, but there's the laundry list of materials that you want to gather before you start seeds. And now that you have everything at your side, and I wanted to just back up for a minute about the soil. If you're looking for soil, we have our beautiful gorgeous organic compost-based soil on our website. And we also have this DIY potting mix, which is awesome. I wish you could feel it. It's all the minerals that are generally not in potting mix that actually make potting mix expensive. So these are all organic minerals that you can combine. There's a recipe on the back, and you can combine it with peat moss, compost, and a bit of perlite. And this little container makes 80 quarts of really high quality potting mix. So it's by far your most economical option for potting mix, and it's perfect for soil blocking as well. So now our next step, number 2. Number 1 is gather materials. Number 2 is fill your containers / make your soil blocks. So let's talk about containers. If you're filling containers, like 6-packs are awesome. These cell trays are great. And egg cartons are for eggs. They grow very suboptimal transplants, and the same is true for those little jiffy pots that are like little pellets that compress, that when you get them moist they rise. It's an awesome idea, but the soil inside them generally is very just nutrient poor, and that is shooting yourself in the foot. So I don't recommend those things at all. But other containers, like takeout containers, are kind of amazing. You basically just want to make sure that you're putting holes in the bottom. I poked holes every inch along the bottom of this container, and then you want to have them nesting in something that doesn't drain, so that way you're not making a mess of your beautiful kitchen. So with takeout containers are actually pretty ideal. You do want to put 2-3 pennies in the bottom, each corner of the bottom tray, and then it will stand up a little bit above it, so you have nice space so that upper tray can actually drain. So now that you've got, but let me just mention for a moment, all those containers are great. My favorite by far, and you can see we are doing tons of soil blocking. We literally have 10,000 plus soil plants we grow in soil blocks every year, because soil blocks just make the healthiest, happiest transplants of all. They have the large and also the mini, and here's a large one, and you can see they never get root bound because they naturally air prune, and because we're putting soil in and then springing them out, there's a little compression in there, so they're dense enough that this is going to be just fine for the coming weeks that we're growing seedlings in them. So it's an amazing, there's way more soil per volume than your 6-pack or any other container of comparable size. And so you have way more nutrients available to your plants as well. So we love soil blocks so much, and these mini soil blockers are amazing. So the minis are ideal if you have a heat mat. It is optimizing that heat mat and anything that needs extra heat. So for example, Seeds that are slow to germinate or need a lot of heat to germinate thrive with this mini soil blocker. So seeds that need heat to germinate, here we are. Our peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, they're really tropical. They want heat. And so if you have them a ½ inch above the heat mat, they germinate in a fraction of the time compared to 2 inches above the heat mat with a soil block or with a container. Also, slow to germinate seeds are ideally started in mini blocks. So things like thyme and oregano, lavender, so many herbs and flowers take their time germinating, but when they're a ½ inch above, ½ inch above the heat mat, all of a sudden they germinate in a fraction of the time. So I love, love, love soil blocking. And where like your 6-packs and other containers, you can basically use any potting mix. Of course, richer is better, but the texture isn't going to tremendously matter. The soil blocks, on the other hand, you definitely want something that is high percentage coconut coir and or peat moss. Even though those 2 ingredients aren't particularly renewable, at this point it's your best bet for this soil blocking because though both of those things compress without reducing, while we're maintaining plenty of pore space, plenty of air space. So the soil blockers are amazing for that. And you can see I'm using my fingers to make sure that that compression is pretty significant. You don't want to overdo it, but you definitely want it to be really well packed in, because if they're crumbling, as in here, we'll pop them out. It's such fun! As they pop out, ta-da! Now you have all these glorious ones. There's actually 60 that fit in this little takeout container. Isn't that amazing? So if they're at all, crumbly, you can simply put it right back in and make another one. So the learning curve with these soil blockers are phenomenal. I just remembered a quick little tip on these containers too. So we'll back up. If you're using cell trays, 6-packs, anything like this, go like this. Gently tamp the soil down because there is air. If you just fill it up, there are air pockets. And so you can see how much farther, once you tamp down a few times, add a little extra soil, and then you'll be set. Because if there are big air blocks in air pockets in those cells, your seedlings won't be nearly as happy. So now that you've got, your beautiful little soil blocks, and here, by the way, I'll show you right now. As soon as they germinate, you want to take them out and pot them up into, here's a large soil blocker from this guy, it's an amazing system, or putting it into, a larger container of some kind. So, yeah, and again, if they're crumbly at all, that is no good, and it's totally understandable. We all have our learning curves. Just throw them back into your soil if they're at all crumbling, and that way you'll have the most wonderful learning curve on the planet and the most beautiful soil blocks on the planet as well. So now let's sow seeds. So yeah, we'll take out our seeds, and they are so small, and sometimes I use tweezers or toothpicks, and I sow them, and I put 1 seed in each block, friends. And here's why. Certainly with Fruition seeds, if our seeds germinate less than 90%, we don't sell them. So they're really high germination rates. National average is 65, like the minimum is 65. So many seed companies, like the larger, big box store companies, will manage for that because it's the way to be more profitable, and then you don't have to charge as much for your seed packet, and so, but also we don't want to be planting too many seeds in each because we have to thin them down to the strongest one as soon as they emerge. So if you're planting more than 2 in a cell, you're making lots more work for yourself. If your seeds are older, feel free to put 2 or 3, but honestly, if you've got fresh seeds from Fruition, plant just 1 per cell and you'll be so set. So yeah, plant your seeds, not too many in per cell, per soil block, and then cover them, and not too much. As a general rule, you only sow seeds twice their depth. So that is not much at all. Most seeds are so small. And so one of the most common mistakes people make is simply sowing seeds too deeply. So I've just tucked a touch of soil on this, and now I will put it in this lovely takeout container with draining holes. Put it in our top, and I can put it right on the heat mat. And so here are the heat mats that we share, and they're the perfect size for, a single one of these standard trays. So you can fit a lot of seedlings on there, friends. And so now we have come to the time when we label them, and ideally I try to even write the label before I sow them, but either way, write your label, not only with Chiapas, the variety name, and this is our earliest cherry tomato, this in Coyote, and she is resistant to early blight, late blight, Septoria leaf spot, and she's always our earliest tomato, and because she has all of that disease resistance, she's often our last tomato that we're still eating at frost too. So I not only put the name Chiapas on there, I put the date, because I'm prone to walking past these little seedlings and saying, why haven't they emerged yet? It's been 2 weeks. But lo and behold, if I write the date on there, all of a sudden, oh, it's been 2 days. So that just helps me keep a little more on track. And check it out. There are all kinds of markers and Sharpies in the world. There are oil-based markers in the world. Those will withstand the temperatures, the humidity, all the water that they'll be subjected to. So oil-based markers are fabulous for taking notes. And while you're taking notes, let's just mention where we're taking notes. I mean, we have great big spreadsheets as well, but we also made our across the seasons perpetual calendar for these exact moments. So a perpetual calendar, instead of having rather than having like Monday, Tuesday through Sunday, we have dates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then years. So you can see all these marvelous things that we're taking notes on. And then you can see across the years, across the seasons, if you will, we'll be able to track and adapt, see the emergent patterns. And so I put not only today, we're sowing tomatoes, peppers, eggplants in mini blocks, in takeout containers as a trial experiment. Amazing! But I also have the northern flicker returns and the kingfisher returns. We harvested nettle and the ramps have arrived. The forsythia is in full bloom. We planted peas. So you can see this is gardening as well as just what's happening in the world around us notes. And it can be whatever you want for your life as well. We also put birthdays and other celebrations. April 1st is Wangari Maathai's birthday. If you love trees in Africa, if you love trees, you love Wangari. So there's so many things to celebrate and ways to keep notes, but here is one of them. And I wanted to show you too, in the very back, we have this whole section that we call, ooh, yes, let's dig in. And so this is a section dedicated to one particular crop. So for example, our tomatoes, here's the variety and the seed source and when we started them indoors, when we planted them outdoors, the spacing, amendments to the soil, date harvested, insects, diseases, other notes. So it's so essential to be looking through this calendar as like, yes, here are all these details as they correspond to all the rest of the everything. But if you want to have this place too where it's the one-stop shop of all your tomato notes, that is another way to stay nice and organized this season and for many seasons to come and amplify your joy as well as your abundance. So now let's talk about heat and light. Straight talk on heat and light. If you don't have a heat mat, they're going to take a lot longer to germinate, friends. Heat mats, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, they're very tropical plants. And so they need lots of heat. And if you don't have a heat mat, you can still find the warmest place in your home. So the top of your fridge is a great place. And just take a look around, see where is the warmest place in your home, knowing that the warmest place might actually be dark. And for the first few days, that's actually fine. These seeds, as they germinate, they don't need light. But as soon as that sprout begins to emerge, as soon as they emerge, they need light. So you can put them in the warmest place in your home in the dark for a few days, as long as a few days from then, after you sow them, you're checking them, ideally multiple times a day. And the instant the very first seedling emerges, you're putting them in a place that has plenty of light, even if it's a little cooler. So again, not ideal. Your heat mat makes it so much easier, but I get it. We might all not have heat mats. So let's talk about light. So plants, seedlings of vegetables, flowers, herbs, they ideally want 16 to 18 hours of light in a given day for optimal. Otherwise, a full day's sunlight is great. So here we are, with our greenhouse here in New York, and that's plenty of light. But honestly, in your house, there's not enough light. Even if you have a sunny south-facing window, that's just not enough light to really give your transplants a good start. Your goal with any transplant is to have it be as straight and as stout, as short as possible. And so if your plant is starting to get leggy and is starting to curve anywhere toward the light, it's really stressed for light, and that is just the moment to be honest with yourself. And it's really tricky because not all lights are created equal, and I wanted to show you this. We do have these awesome grow lights that our friend Vic actually makes in Illinois, and they're 17 inches, and they perfectly fit one of these standard trays for growing seedlings. I fit 4 trays at 20 inches. I have 4 trays that I switch around for microgreens all winter, but as soon as you're actually growing seedlings, you want to have them 6 inches above the light. And if you have a light different from ours, look at their recommendations, because that shifts from light to light. But with our LED light, it's 6 inches that you want to have this light hovering above those plants. And it has these little drawstrings, so you can very easily, oh yes! Do as I say and not as I do. So you can very easily lift them up. And yeah, when you have actual plants underneath them holding the base, they'll be just fine. And these bases we actually don't share on our website. We found these quite miraculously, but there's lots of other ways that you can approach hanging your light, and we'll send you tips on that when you get one, and I'm always happy to help you troubleshoot too. So having good light is absolutely essential for growing your seedlings. If you don't have good light, then erring on the side, again, like sowing seeds too early is a thing. I would recommend not starting until the very earliest or the very latest time. So here in Zone 5, really just going for like 5 weeks, mid-April, start your transplants of your tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. Really though, I would consider very strongly recommending to you, if you don't have a great light and a great seed starting setup, that just hold off on your peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, and just focus on plants that are 4 weeks or less as indoor transplants. They still won't be optimally healthy, but a 4-week-old transplant can bounce back way quicker than a 6 to 8 week transplant. So something like lettuce, kale, tomato, broccoli, parsley, basil, zinnias, way more amenable to a 4-week without optimal light situation indoors than a tomato, pepper, eggplant, ground cherry that needs at least 6. So yes, honesty on heat and light are really, really, really important when you're growing tomatoes and peppers and eggplants. So yeah, I'll just mention again, take notes, and early and often as you're sowing your seeds, as you're potting them up, as you're planting them out, as you're harvesting them. I'll share another video where we dial in potting up, but just to mention really quickly, if you're growing in a tiny little awesome soil block, I love you, and as soon as that sprout emerges, you want to be potting this up, because that is hardly any soil. Your plants know it too. So pot this up immediately as soon as they go. If you have something like a 6-pack, you can let them get their first true leaves in this 6-pack before planting it into something larger. And as you pot them up, the tomatoes, you can plant right up to their uppermost leaves. All of that stem will actually become, crazy fact, will become a root system. That is, tomatoes are the only common vegetable flower herb we grow in our gardens that do that. Tomatoes and potatoes. So your peppers, eggplants, you want to be sowing, and that seedling, where it hits the soil, you want to be maintaining that as you pot it up. But tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, or pardon me, tomatoes, you want to be burying in as up to its neck, up to its uppermost leaves. And that's a nice way to kind of manage seedlings that get leggy too, your tomatoes that get leggy. So, and we don't start feeding our transplants until they have 2 sets of true leaves, unless you have really not great soil potting mix that you're starting with, in which case you can start a couple weeks in. Once they have their first set of true leaves, you can just foliar feed just a touch of your fish emulsion, and that will really help. But if you've got really rich, nutrient-dense potting soil, you're all set for the first month, 6 weeks of their lives. But yeah, once we have the 2 sets of true leaves going, we are feeding with our fish emulsion, and 1 ounce of our fish emulsion dilutes into 1 gallon of water. And be sure to check out our separate video and blog about this whole using fish emulsion and dialing that in as well. But friends, it has come to the time. Now we go and we sow seeds. So by all means do, and if you have questions, by all means reach out. We are in this together. And thank you so much for knowing that seeds and you are not as small as you may seem.